Before I had the space and money of my own to collect real arcade machines, I started off by collecting the associated knickknacks. I've built up way too many of these things over the years, and every now and then I have to dump a whole bunch of them on eBay. But the thing I'm talking about today is somewhere in between those two categories. A real game and a collectible knickknack. It's these little toy arcade machines. These are little miniature arcade machines with little miniature versions of arcade games that you can play on a tiny little vacuum fluorescent display. And honestly, if you don't have the space to collect real arcade machines, I would recommend collecting these instead, because in many ways they're a direct parallel to collecting real arcade machines. They never work, they're overpriced, and the replacement artwork is ridiculously expensive. I've covered a similar topic to these already when I talked about the 1950s Coney Island penny machine game. Just like this, that used a completely different design to try to emulate the commercial machine. But back to these mini arcade machines, they're really hard to find, and they're really expensive when you do find them, especially on eBay. I have no interest in paying anywhere near the going rate for one of these things, but I have found that if I'm a little patient, I can find a broken one in decent shape for a justifiable price. And that's how I got this little Pac-Man machine here. As you can see, it currently doesn't do anything. If I wiggle the batteries, still nothing. So I'm going to open this machine up and see what I can do. After removing all of the obvious screws, I found that the device still did not want to open. It turns out that there were 2 screws hidden under this control panel overlay. After removing these, the rest of the device came apart. The first thing I can see here is some corrosion on the battery contacts, so I'll need to remove that. It also looks like some of that battery acid made its way to these traces, so I'll need to reconnect these 2 sides. There's also corrosion across the rest of the board, but I tested all of the affected traces for continuity, and everything checked out. So I just cleaned off the corrosion with some rubbing alcohol. I had initially thought that these solder joints were cold because of the holes in the middle of the joint, but those ended up being a factor of the design of the pins themselves. I then removed the corrosion on the battery contacts with a file. Well, there we go. That was a pretty simple fix. Well, we're not quite done yet. The joystick for the first player is not very responsive. It uses these weird contacts that I can't find anywhere else, and I guess they're just worn out. So I'm going to swap the contacts from the left joystick to the right, since I'm pretty much never going to have anyone wanting to play this head-to-head with me. Well, while I was doing that, I noticed this little circle around the pin that the contact connects to. This is the side that wasn't working, by the way. And if I reheat it, that little circle disappears. Also, on the side that was working, no circles. That tells me that these were probably cold solder joints. I guess I'll know for sure in a minute if both joysticks work fine now. Well, both joysticks work fine now. So now I've got a working miniature Pac-Man machine, and I didn't pay anywhere near the going price for it. But now, I'd like to talk about this little Qbert machine. This is the only one that I actually found locally, well, locally when I still lived in Georgia, and it doesn't work either, even though it did when I bought it. It just squeals like this whenever you turn it on. Well, that might have something to do with it. Hopefully this corrosion is all external and isn't being caused by the chip itself. I'm going to clean it off and hope that it doesn't come back. I then checked the voltage at the battery connectors, and I was only getting a little more than half a volt. And if you don't know, when you stack batteries in a series, you actually add their voltage together. So all of these batteries should total up to around 6 volts. So the problem here is going to be corroded contacts again. So I desoldered the connectors and removed them. That way I could sand them down more thoroughly. I also took this opportunity to clean the whole mini cabinet. Then I reinstalled the battery contacts and soldered the wires back on. It sounds like that didn't fix the problem. Well, I'm getting 5.9 volts at the batteries, so it's not a power issue. So looking at the components on this side, this diode looks a little crusty, and I'm sure these capacitors are all out of spec at this point. So I'm just going to shotgun replace all these components since there are so few of them. Alright, I've rebuilt this device with all new components, excluding a few that I can't get replacements for, so let's fire it up and see what we get. And nothing. I'm getting voltage at the power switch, at the capacitor, but I'm getting nothing from the tube. All I can think is that there's something wrong with this main chip here, since I went way out of my way to make sure that all of my replacement components were the proper ones. I even ordered a new old stock of some discontinued components to make sure everything was exactly right. The only parts I couldn't replace were that main chip, the tube, and the transformer. I suspected the transformer, but I checked the voltages coming from it, and they were the same as the voltages coming from the transformer on my Pac-Man machine. I even tried swapping in the transformer from the Pac-Man machine, and it still did not work. With every project like this, there comes a point where you can either be obsessive and keep wasting money on it until it works, or you can just call it a day and move on. And I'm gonna move on. Well, honestly, I'm a little sad now, and there's only one thing that can make me happy again. Zaxxon! Yep, they even made one of these for Zaxxon. And just like a real Zaxxon, it's far heavier than its other arcade counterparts. But just like the others, it doesn't do anything when I switch it on, so I'll have to take this one apart too. Are you seeing this thing? Look at how much is going on here. It's even got a second screen in the back. Now I really want to get this thing working, just so I can see how it works. Going to check the wires here for voltage from the battery terminal. And I'm only getting about 1.5 volts, so I'll clean these battery terminals too. Let's see if that works. Hey! Oh, I already died. Yep, that's Zaxxon, alright. Well, it's working now more than it was before, but it looks like a couple of the characters on the display are missing. Let me take this apart again so I can show you more easily. Yep, you can see right there that the ship doesn't light up on that specific spot. So let's see what's going on underneath this thing. Looks like I've just got some cold solder joints here. The pins have popped right out of the solder, and I bet you that that's our problem right there. And now it's back. It's really neat how they made this thing work. Instead of using a vertical display, they used one angled in the direction of the scrolling playfield. Most of the background elements and enemies are on this one display, while all of the frames for the ship and the barrier are on the other. A reflective, transparent window reflects the background objects, while allowing your ship to shine through on top of them. This makes for a really unique look that you'd never get on a single VFD screen. Speaking of that window, it's time to clean it and put the rest of the machine back together. Well, now that I've got these two working again, and saved a ton of money in the process, what do I think of them? Well, they're an interesting novelty, but that's about it. The games that are on them are so limited that the resemblance to the original games is more cute than entertaining. I must say, though, that the Zaxxon one comes a lot closer to emulating the real machine than the others. Even closer than some console ports I have. It seems like a lot of thought went into making this machine look and play as much like the original as possible. Going so far as to include the flight stick controller, with the red LED on top, and fire buttons on the left and right side of it. They did, however, neglect to construct the cabinet from granola. Well, I won't be inviting all my buddies to come over and play a little game of VFD Pac-Man. Well, I won't be inviting all my buddies to come over and play a game of head-to-head VFD Tiny Pac-Man. These will make an interesting addition to the collectibles display. Not that one. Almost dropped it on camera. That would have been really bad. I would have even fewer subscribers. But that's all for this episode. So thank you for taking time out of your day to watch it, and goodbye. You thought I was gonna have some sort of closing gimmick. You thought I was gonna make a joke before I left. I'm not. The video's just over. I'm going to do whatever, something.